It just did not jive with my thing, and I didn't trust him. I felt like he wasn't serious.
It's safe to say Dirty Dancing was a cultural moment. We got to see Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey bust cool moves, while also giving us one of cinema's most electric love stories. From the music, to the dancing, and that final lift that made audiences believe in fairy tale romance, the movie was an epitome of success. But what if we told you things weren't as happy-go-lucky behind the camera? What if we told you that the chemistry you probably stood up to applaud was anything but effortless? What if we told you that the truth is Jennifer couldn't stand Patrick Swayze? Why, you ask? Well, there's a lot to unpack, and we're uncovering what really went down on the set of Dirty Dancing. From the moments that made the film legendary to the behind-the-scenes arguments that nearly broke it apart, let's get right into the real reason Jennifer Grey couldn't stand Patrick Swayze. Production and scene secrets. If you were a fan of 80s television, chances are that you saw Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey together in an entirely different movie. And no, it wasn't a fever dream or a figment of your imagination. It actually happened. The duo had worked together in the 1984 action film Red Dawn. At the time, both future stars were still a rising part of a young Hollywood ensemble cast playing teenagers resisting a Soviet invasion. And while the end result of the movie looked great, things weren't as rosy behind the scenes. The truth is, once shooting began, their opposite personalities, clashing work styles, and grueling filming conditions turned what looked like magic on screen into daily frustration behind the scenes. Reports from those who worked on Red Dawn suggest that both Patrick and Jennifer had contrasting personalities. Patrick was the disciplined type, a trained dancer, athlete, and the son of a choreographer, while Jennifer had a more spontaneous, less disciplined, and more emotionally driven energy. Separately, both were wonderful. In fact, their personalities played a huge role in getting them the gigs that would change their lives forever. However, together, they just didn't seem to go well. In fact, they'd both made a huge impression on each other that at the time Dirty Dancing came around, Jennifer still remembered Patrick as someone she wasn't particularly fond of. When she later recalled her first reaction to hearing he'd been cast as Johnny Castle, she admitted, "Oh no, that guy." It wasn't hate, but it was definitely hesitation. For her, there was history, and not the good kind that made you giggle and swing your legs excitedly. It was the kind that made her not exactly see him as her dream co-star. Patrick, on his part, carried the confidence of a man who'd been trained to deliver. He was focused, precise, and relentless about getting every move right. And so, when both were once again jammed into a movie together, it meant that their creative energies were about to collide once again. The tension begins. Dirty Dancing was a movie that shaped generations. In fact, for some of us, no matter how often we rewatch it, the feeling never changes. It's like the feeling you get when you return to a childhood home, or when you find your lucky sock from 3 decades ago with 3 huge holes in it. It's nostalgic, and it has all the feels. If you haven't seen the movie, it's a simple story set in the summer of 1963. It follows Frances "Baby" Houseman, a sheltered young woman spending vacation with her family at a Catskills resort. When she discovers a secret world of music and dance led by the resort's charismatic instructor, Johnny Castle, her life changes forever. Curious, Baby steps out of her comfort zone and into Johnny's world, where she learns about passion, courage, and the power of standing up for what you believe in. Just like that, what begins as an innocent crush turns into a transformative love story that defies class barriers, family expectations, and fear itself. But, as wonderful as the movie sounds, things weren't exactly as fascinating behind the scenes. Once Dirty Dancing began filming, it didn't take long for the differences between Patrick and Jennifer to surface. Patrick was a perfectionist, coming from years of formal training in ballet and dance. He approached choreography like a science, deliberate, intense, and physically demanding. Jennifer, however, was less experienced in dance. She was still learning, and sometimes her nerves got in the way. In his memoir, Patrick wrote that while his co-star was a natural actress with a raw emotional presence, she was also prone to what he called silly moods. She'd burst into laughter or tears during takes, especially when she got nervous or self-conscious. One moment that perfectly captured this tension actually made it into the film. During the rehearsal montage, the one where Johnny trails his fingers down Baby's arm as she tries not to laugh, Jennifer really was giggling uncontrollably. She was ticklish and couldn't keep a straight face no matter how many takes they did. While it looked cute on camera, behind the scenes, Patrick grew frustrated, wanting to move forward. And it definitely didn't help that Jennifer kept laughing. Eventually, the crew decided to keep the footage because the mix of irritation and amusement between them looked authentic. What viewers eventually saw as chemistry was, in truth, a moment of real-life exasperation between two actors who couldn't have been more different in temperament. But what happens when the tension grows deeper? So deep that even the director has to step in. The director steps in. As the days went on, that tension became noticeable. The filmmakers could sense the strain between their two leads, and it began to show on camera. Director Emil Ardolino and producer Eleanor Bergstein, who also wrote the script, knew the story lived or died by the chemistry between Baby and Johnny, so they really couldn't afford for the actors to fall out completely. At one point, the director decided to have both actors sit down together and watch their original screen test, the audition tape that had landed them the roles. That footage showed a completely different dynamic: raw attraction, playful teasing, and genuine warmth. The moment they watched it, both actors were reminded of what had drawn them together creatively in the first place. It worked. For a while, at least, the tension gave way to renewed focus. Still, the production was anything but easy. Dirty Dancing was shot on a tight budget, just $6 million, and on a tight schedule. Most of the Kellerman's resort scenes were filmed at a real lodge in Virginia, while others were shot in North Carolina. On screen, the story unfolds in the heat of summer, but in reality, the cast and crew were filming in late autumn. You can even see the leaves in the background turning brown in some shots if you look closely. And if you've got a keen eye, you just might catch the breath of the actors visible in the cold air. Which brings us to one of the most memorable scenes in the entire movie: the lake scene. Or more fittingly, the lake scene from hell. The lake scene from hell. One of the most remarkable scenes in the movie. The lift practice in the lake turned into one of the most miserable filming experiences of both their careers. It might not look like so on camera, but the lake was freezing, with the temperature hovering around 40 degrees. Unfortunately, both actors had to wade in repeatedly while the cameras rolled. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they were both wearing light summer clothing that offered no warmth at all. Jennifer would later share that her lips were literally turning blue, while Patrick's knees were going numb from the cold. In between takes, they'd try to warm up with blankets, but there was no way to escape the chill. The production team didn't have the budget for heating equipment or reshoots, meaning every take mattered. As the discomfort grew, so did the tension. Patrick, trying to keep the choreography tight, would push through. Jennifer, shivering and tired, found it hard to focus. But when you watch that scene today, the exhaustion and determination on their faces don't look like acting. And that's probably because they weren't. The struggle was real, and even though it further exacerbated the tension between them, it made the moment feel alive and forever cemented the lift in Hollywood history. The lift that made history. Now, let's talk about that lift. It might surprise you to know, but what's perhaps the most iconic moment in Dirty Dancing wasn't rehearsed extensively before filming. Despite what many assume, Jennifer and Patrick didn't practice it dozens of times. In fact, Jennifer later revealed that she had refused to rehearse it at all. She was terrified she'd fall, and she didn't want to try it until the cameras were rolling. Patrick, a consummate professional, was skeptical but went along with it. And when the time came, the lift worked on the first try. The moment wasn't perfect. Jennifer's nerves were visible, and Patrick's focus was intense. But it became cinematic magic. What no one knew then was how much it reflected their real-life working dynamic. One cautious and hesitant, the other steady and determined to make the impossible happen. Patrick even recalled that Jennifer's fear and laughter would often frustrate him, but at the same time, he admired her spontaneity. It gave their scenes an unpredictable spark. "She'd giggle and ruin a take," he wrote. Then suddenly, she'd give the performance of her life. That unpredictability became the heartbeat of Dirty Dancing, especially considering it was a story about a young woman finding courage and a man learning to let go. Heat, pressure, and perfectionism. Off camera, the set was just as intense as the dance floor. Many of the scenes were filmed in cramped, sweltering interiors without proper air conditioning. Lights burned hot, makeup melted, tempers flared. Patrick, who was already dealing with a knee injury from his dance background, pushed himself through long hours of rehearsals. Jennifer, meanwhile, felt the pressure of playing a lead in a demanding role that required constant dancing, emotional depth, and vulnerability. The physical toll of the film mirrored the emotional one. Crew members later said that while the duo often disagreed, their clashes were never mean-spirited. They were more like creative friction that came from different ways of working. Because the truth is, they weren't enemies. They were two professionals under enormous stress, trying to make something special. But before we jump right into why Jennifer couldn't stand Patrick, let's go over a few other behind-the-scenes secrets you never knew. Different cast. Did you know that before Patrick became the unforgettable Johnny Castle, several other names were in the running, including Billy Zane, Benicio del Toro, and Val Kilmer? That's right. All three men had a shot at playing the beloved character. Ultimately, however, it was Patrick's blend of raw intensity and formal training at the Harkness and Joffrey ballet schools that ultimately sealed his place in film history. Ironically, he almost turned down the role that would define his career. Years earlier, a serious knee injury from his Broadway days had left him wary of returning to dance, and his resume even carried a warning: no dancing. On the other side of the casting room, the search for Baby Houseman was just as competitive. Before Jennifer landed the part, young stars like Sarah Jessica Parker and Winona Ryder were considered. In the end, it was Jennifer's emotional depth and natural vulnerability that won her the role, even though she was already in her mid-20s playing a teenager. In a later interview with the New York Times, she revealed that she earned just $50,000 for the film, a modest sum for a movie that would go on to become one of the most iconic love stories of all time. Now, it's pretty hard to see anyone else as Baby and Johnny, especially since they were both so dedicated to their craft, even pushing through injury for the perfect shot. Painful dancing. Patrick's dedication to his craft came at a serious physical cost during the filming of the movie. Long before stepping into Johnny Castle's shoes, he had suffered a major knee injury during his Broadway career in Greece. The damage was so severe that his professional resume once read, "No dancing." But when Dirty Dancing came along, he couldn't resist. Throughout filming, Patrick's old injury frequently flared up. The intense choreography, repeated takes, and long shooting hours pushed his body to the limit. The famous lift scene in the lake was especially brutal. The freezing water stiffened his muscles, making every movement risky. According to his autobiography, The Time of My Life, Patrick had to ice his swollen knee nightly just to keep going. Despite the pain, he refused to let it show. He completed every dance sequence, every lift, and every emotional scene with the same fierce energy that defined his character. In the end, his perseverance paid off, because not only did he bring Johnny Castle to life, he also proved that passion can outlast pain. It was a performance that quite literally hurt to make, and yet it made him a legend. But what about a performance that wasn't even a performance? The tickle scene. It might surprise you to learn that one of the most beloved moments in the movie, when Baby bursts into laughter as Johnny trails his fingers down her arm, wasn't in the script at all. Jennifer's laughter was genuine. She was extremely ticklish. And Patrick's growing frustration on camera was completely real. Co-creator Eleanor Bergstein later told Cosmopolitan that the moment was almost lost forever. She said, "We didn't even remember we had that footage. We had reshot the scene where she didn't laugh, and it was only when our dance editor found the earlier take in the editing room that we rediscovered it. When we saw it, we all burst out laughing, even Jennifer and Patrick, who had forgotten it happened." The team loved the authenticity so much that they decided to keep it in the final cut, turning a moment of real-life irritation into one of the film's most endearing scenes. Casting changes, controversy, and doubts. At this point, we've established that not everything on the Dirty Dancing set went according to plan. Not even the casting for Baby's mother. Lynn Lipton, who was originally cast, had to leave production after falling ill during the first week of filming. Kelly Bishop, initially set to play Vivian Pressman, the resort guest who flirts with Johnny, had to step into the maternal role instead. To fill the gap, assistant choreographer Miranda Garrison took over as Vivian, bringing a dancer's confidence and elegance to the part. There were other near misses too. Famous intimacy therapist Dr. Ruth Westheimer was offered the role of Mrs. Schumacher, but declined when she discovered the character was secretly the resort's thief. Casting changes aside, perhaps the most heated creative debate centered on Penny's abortion storyline. Studio executives pushed writer Eleanor to remove it to secure corporate sponsorships, but she stood firm. "If I take it out, everything falls apart," she argued, and she was right. Strangely, even after the film was completed, confidence in Dirty Dancing was low. One producer reportedly told Eleanor to burn the negative and take the insurance. Few believed in the movie then, but audiences soon would. Because when the movie hit theaters on August 21, 1987, no one expected it to become a global phenomenon. Global phenomenon. Producer Linda Gottlieb later revealed that the script had been rejected 43 times before finally being picked up by a small independent studio, Vestron Pictures. Remember that Dirty Dancing was made on a modest $6 million budget. In fact, it seemed so unpromising that even the crew doubted it would make much of an impact. But once released, the film shattered all expectations. The movie grossed over $214 million worldwide, making it one of the most successful independent films of its time. It also became the first film ever to sell more than 1 million copies on home video, a milestone that helped transform how audiences consumed movies at home. In fact, not even the soundtrack was left out of the success. Led by the Oscar-winning hit "I've Had the Time of My Life," became just as iconic as the film itself, topping charts around the world and cementing the story's place in pop culture history. Over the years, the Dirty Dancing legacy continued to evolve. In 2004, a prequel titled Dirty Dancing: Havana Nights was released, set in late 1950s Cuba. Though it featured new characters and a different storyline, it paid homage to the original, even including a cameo from Patrick as a dance instructor. While the prequel didn't reach the same heights as the 1987 classic, it introduced the Dirty Dancing name to a new generation. More than a decade later, in 2015, ABC produced a made-for-television remake starring Abigail Breslin as Baby and Colt Pratt as Johnny. The film aimed to reimagine the story for modern audiences but received mixed reviews, with many viewers feeling it couldn't capture the chemistry or energy that made the original unforgettable. Then, in 2020, it was confirmed that Jennifer, the original Baby Houseman, was set to executive produce and star in a brand new Dirty Dancing film. The announcement immediately reignited excitement among fans who had waited decades to see what became of Baby. While early details about the story were kept under wraps, Jennifer later shared that the film would explore what happens 30 years later, set in the 90s. "I'm excited by the challenge of looking at it from the point of view of what happens when it's 30 years later," she said. "What happened to the person who had that experience, and what is now relevant about the original story at a different moment, looking at it through a different lens?" Jennifer confirmed that she would indeed reprise her role as Baby, marking her long-awaited return to Kellerman's. The new Dirty Dancing was officially scheduled for release on Valentine's Day 2024, promising a nostalgic yet reimagined continuation of one of the most beloved romantic films ever made. However, it's late 2025 now, and we still haven't gotten a whiff of when the movie is set to be released. According to Jennifer, it needs to be done right, and there's still a lot of work going on to nail it down. Now that we've covered most of the behind-the-scenes secrets you never knew about, let's circle back to why Jennifer couldn't stand Patrick. Why Jennifer couldn't stand Patrick. For Jennifer, working with Patrick wasn't a dream either. Eleanor once recalled that Jennifer really didn't want Patrick. Matter of fact, she was so reluctant to star in another project with him that she literally begged the producers to have anyone else but Patrick. When Eleanor told Patrick about Jennifer's concerns, he volunteered to speak with her privately. According to Eleanor, he went in alone and sat with her for about half an hour, and when they came out, both their eyes were red. We never got to know what happened in that room, but whatever it was, it changed everything between the duo. Because from that moment on, they were Johnny and Baby. Still, off-screen, their relationship was defined by tension, miscommunication, and clashing personalities, two strong creative forces pulling in opposite directions. But why did Jennifer really not want to work with Patrick? Was it simply because they'd had a previous bad experience together? Well, just as it was for Patrick, the truth is it wasn't hatred or ego, but the differences between them. Patrick and Jennifer simply worked, thought, and felt in entirely different ways, and the latter didn't like that at all. A clash of backgrounds, temperaments. Patrick was strict. Think of him as a veteran dad running his household like a well-drilled boot camp. But this was because he grew up surrounded by discipline. His mother, Patsy Swayze, was a respected dance instructor and choreographer, and he trained under her from an early age. By the time he got to Dirty Dancing, he was a professional in every sense, focused, athletic, and exacting about his work. He believed in repetition, control, and precision. Jennifer came from a different world. The daughter of Broadway actor Joel Grey, she had grown up in New York's artistic scene. She was emotional, intuitive, and spontaneous, a performer who led with feeling rather than form. That approach made her a natural on camera, but it also made her sensitive to pressure and easily frustrated by conflict. So when the two were paired in a film that required hours of intense dance rehearsals and physical closeness, sparks flew, and not always the good kind. In interviews, Jennifer has said that Patrick's intensity often made her nervous. His fearlessness with my fearfulness, she once described the perfect summary of their working dynamic. He was confident to the point of confrontation. She was hesitant and self-critical. Where he thrived under pressure, she tensed up. That imbalance sometimes left Jennifer feeling overwhelmed and defensive, particularly when Patrick's perfectionism came out on set. And boy, did he take his job seriously. Maybe even a little too seriously for someone like Jennifer. On set, he could be demanding, expecting everyone around him to match his level of focus. In his memoir, he shared his frustration during filming. And even though he didn't mean it cruelly, it was simply the truth of how their dynamic worked. Jennifer, meanwhile, felt that Patrick's seriousness made him difficult to relax around. Still, moments that caught the extension between them, like the arm tickle scene, became part of the movie's magic. Nonetheless, it never changed the fact that behind them was a truth neither actor could hide. And it was that one found the other intimidating, and the other found the one exasperating. However, their tension wasn't just about different working styles, it also had emotional undertones. The film was physically and mentally demanding, and both actors were pushed to their limits during long shoot days in the heat, the cold, and the chaos of a low-budget production. That kind of exhaustion can make even small differences feel huge. Also, bear in mind that Jennifer was still relatively new to leading roles, and she felt enormous pressure to prove herself. Patrick, on the other hand, was already a seasoned performer and was pretty used to taking control. He'd offer advice, corrections, and suggestions, all meant to help, but not always received that way. For Jennifer, who was trying to find her own confidence, that might have felt condescending. At times, she'd pull away emotionally, which only made Patrick push harder to keep the scenes grounded. It was a tug-of-war between her sensitivity against his authority. One crew member later described their dynamic as a dance of resistance. They respected each other, but they weren't in sync off-camera. And yet, that very resistance gave their on-screen relationship its edge. Pressure cooker filming. The film's tight schedule and shoestring budget didn't help. Everyone was under stress. The cast rehearsed until their feet bled, and shooting often stretched into the early morning. The temperature in some scenes was unbearable. In others, it was freezing. It also didn't help that Patrick was battling his chronic knee injury, forcing him to push through pain. Jennifer was also dealing with her own emotional exhaustion, trying to balance vulnerability with professionalism. Under those conditions, patience ran thin. Crew members remember moments where Patrick would quietly retreat to refocus. Interestingly, this is where the story of the director stepping in originated. According to Hollywood legend, one day, Jennifer reportedly became so frustrated with Patrick's strictness during rehearsal that she refused to continue dancing with him. And this was when the director stepped in, forcing them to sit together and re-watch their screen test that had initially landed them the roles. On that tape, the chemistry between them was undeniable, playful, flirty, and full of promise. As they watched, both realized something important. Whatever was happening between them personally, they needed each other to make this film work. And even though that moment didn't erase their differences, it refocused them. They got back on set, and their next few scenes, including the practice montage and the final dance, carried a new intensity. Years later, both actors would reflect on the experience with mixed feelings. Patrick was generous in his memoir, writing that, although Jennifer could be difficult, her spontaneity gave the film something special. He admitted she tested his patience, but he never denied her talent. Jennifer, meanwhile, softened with time. In interviews after Patrick's death in 2009, she spoke of him with warmth and gratitude. "He was strong, and he was fearless," she said. "It was like two opposites meeting." She acknowledged that the tension between them had been real, but also vital to what Dirty Dancing became. After the film, Jennifer and Patrick's paths drifted apart. They never worked together again, but their brief, intense partnership left a permanent mark on pop culture and on each other. For Jennifer, the film was both a breakout and a burden, a role so iconic it was impossible to outgrow. For Patrick, it solidified his status as Hollywood's leading man, but it also reminded him how fragile success could be. Both carried the memories of that summer, the laughter, the tears, the endless takes for the rest of their careers. Thanks to one person's vision, two artists with different rhythms, thrown together in a story that demanded connection, built something transformative. What audiences saw as passion was, in many ways, frustration transformed into art. And perhaps that's what makes Dirty Dancing so unforgettable. The fact that its magic wasn't manufactured. It was born out of discomfort, respect, and the kind of tension that only happens when two people care too much about getting it right. Now, even though we remember the behind-the-scenes reality as messy, cold, and frustrating, in the end, it gave us the kind of authentic emotion that no amount of smooth rehearsal could have achieved. Perhaps, sometimes, the best chemistry isn't born out of harmony, but out of contrast, friction, and the undeniable force of two people trying, against all odds, to make something unforgettable. Are you excited for Jennifer's Dirty Dancing sequel? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you're notified whenever we upload a new video.